Venezuelans all over the world are celebrating the downfall of Nicolas Maduro and thanking President Trump and the United States for its leadership. So, you know what that means. It's time for the Democrats and the media to complain. So, to push back against the myths and disinformation, the Trump administration dispatched Marco Rubio, who, despite his opposition to Trump in 2016, has become one of the clearest and strongest advocates for the administration. Just watch him as he schools NBC during their Sunday talk shows this morning.
Need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela in 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants is? The number one fear that Brazil has, that Colombia has, that all these countries in the region have about what's happening in Venezuela and our involvement is they're afraid of another mass migration event. That's what they fear. This is deeply destabilizing stuff. It's not going to continue to happen. They are not going to come from outside of our hemisphere, destabilize our region in our own backyard, and us have to pay the price for it. Not under President Trump.
Let's talk big picture.
Talk about a brilliant answer there, because he really approached his answer with two different directions here. The first one, he was talking about the foreign policy implications here and how this is actually going to help keep the United States and the Western Hemisphere stronger. And that's why yesterday during his press conference, President Trump talked about the Monroe Doctrine. It was basically his twist on the Monroe Doctrine and about how we have to keep the Western Hemisphere strong. And similar to how the Monroe Doctrine was trying to prevent colonialism here in the Western Hemisphere by outside players such as Europe, it's really how President Trump is going to make sure that countries like Iran and Russia and China aren't going to circumvent sanctions, aren't going to try to find loopholes to enrich themselves and indirectly threaten the United States. So I thought that was a brilliant answer, but there's also the other side, which is the human component of this. Now, 8 million people, obviously that's a lot of people, but to put that into perspective, that is 10% of the population of Venezuela. And I want to go back to 2016 for a moment, because remember, here in the United States, when President Trump was on the verge of getting elected, even though Democrats said it was a joke, remember, Democrats said, a lot of celebrities said this, oh, I'm going to leave the country if President Trump gets elected because he's a dictator, right? How many times did we hear that? That Democrats were going to flee to Europe, flee to wherever they wanted. How many people have left? I mean, other than Rosie O'Donnell, I can't think of many who have. There hasn't been a mass exodus of the United States. But let's just say, for a moment, let's say President Trump was the murderous, evil dictator that the Democrats said he was going to be, and there was some mass migration. 10% of the United States leaving, that would be 34 to 36 million people. I mean, there is only one state out of all 50 states that has a population larger than 34 to 36 million people. That is the state of California. So you could have the population of virtually any other state flee the U.S., and it still wouldn't be equitable or equal to the number of people who have fled Venezuela. And that's why you see so many celebrations all around the world. Here in the United States, I made a video on this yesterday if you want to watch some of those celebrations going on. And there have been even more over the last 24 hours. Just take a look at this huge gathering, this massive celebration that lasted for several hours in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And similar to the celebrations we saw yesterday, you'll notice there were 1 or 2 American flags scattered throughout the crowd. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but that is more American flags than we see at the anti-ICE or any Democrat protest, Democrat rally. So I think that says a lot. You know, the Venezuelan people, no matter where they are thankful for President Trump and the leadership of the United States. But it's not just in Latin America, even in Europe. Take a look. This is in Madrid, Spain. So it's just interesting. Whenever you talk to actual Venezuelans, they are happy about what happened. They're happy that Maduro is gone. The only people who seem to be complaining about this are people who are against President Trump. Of course, the Democrats, the mainstream media, the list goes on. But what is hypocritical about all of their criticisms is that it's a complete 180 from where they were just a few years ago. Let's just go back a few years. In 2020, Chuck Schumer was complaining that President Trump didn't do enough about Venezuela. In fact, in a speech on the floor of the Senate, Chuck Schumer talked about how Maduro is still the dictator in Venezuela, and he's basically complaining that President Trump didn't do enough to get rid of Maduro.
He brags about all these things he wants to do or is doing, but his actions belie his words. Maybe the best metaphor was his claim to bring democracy to Venezuela. There was a big policy there. It flopped. If the policy was working, Juan Guaido wouldn't be in the balcony here. He'd be in Venezuela. He'd be sitting in the president's palace, or at least waging a fight to win. He's here. And the president brags about his Venezuela policy? Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began.
So let me get this straight. Back in 2020, the Democrats wanted President Trump to topple the Maduro regime, and now that he's done it, well, why are you doing this? It's nation building. It's imperialism. You can't win with these guys. He literally did what one of the top Democrat leaders wanted him to do, and still today, the Democrats are complaining about it. Let's go back even further. 2017, what was the big controversy then? Oh yeah, that President Trump stole the election with the help of Russia, right? It was Russia collusion, Russian interference, Russia hacked our elections, whatever the claims were, they were all so convoluted. So in 2019, CNN actually ran this hit piece basically saying that President Trump's failure on Venezuela was because President Trump was a puppet of President Putin. Again, you cannot make this stuff up.
Even in Latin America, the same pattern. While U.S. public support for Venezuela's self-declared interim president Juan Guaido seems to have diminished, strongman Nicolas Maduro is still in power as Russia's support for him remains steadfast, sending a clear message to the world of America in retreat and Vladimir Putin filling the void. And you know, it's remarkable because Vladimir Putin isn't even that popular here in Russia right now because of the bad economic situation and a botched pension reform. So these foreign policy gifts that he keeps getting from President Trump not only make him stronger abroad, but also help keep him in power here in Russia as well, Brianna.
All right, Fred, thank you so much for that report. Okay, so, you know, one of the arguments the president makes is that these places are thousands of miles away. The U.S. doesn't need to involve itself. And hey, if Russia's going to get involved, so be it.
Part of what President Putin's been doing is looking for spots in the world where there is a leadership vacuum and an opening to have influence.
Everyone who knows anything about foreign policy tells you that there's an impact when a global power like the United States is led by someone who actively says we need to pull back. We don't need to be.
So I just wonder, you know, the Democrats, the media, CNN they were basically saying President Trump is a puppet for Putin and he's retreating. He's leaving a vacuum on the world stage. What are they going to say now? Like, now that President Trump has done what he's done, and apparently there's potentially going to be more on the table, is CNN going to change its tune? Are they going to retract all of that? Are they going to say that we were wrong? Of course not. We know how the mainstream media works. They're going to pivot, and they're going to find a way to attack President Trump, even though he did literally what they were calling for just a few short years ago. Again, you cannot win with these people. Well, CNN has appeared to change its tune a little bit. Now, it is hard to teach an old dog new tricks, so don't expect them to become fair and balanced anytime soon. But hey, Chris Murphy was on air. He was attacking President Trump. I'll give credit where credit is due. Dana Bash actually held his feet to the fire and called him a hypocrite on air.
In 2019, you wrote an op-ed and you called for Maduro to be gone. You said, let's get one thing straight. There should no longer be any debate about Maduro's lack of democratic legitimacy. The Trump administration is right to put restoring Venezuelan democracy at the center of our approach to this crisis. A return to a stable democracy is in the interest of the Venezuelan people and the United States and the hemisphere. We don't know what's going to happen with regard to the civilian leadership there. Tom Cotton was just here saying that he hopes that there are democratic elections. Isn't that what you want?
Well, the rest of that article right, was a criticism of President Trump's early moves to saber rattle around regime change.
Yeah, there is no defending his past statements. That's why he had to pivot. That's why he had to say, hey, look over here. That's not all the article was about. Because if he actually defended the substance of his statements, then he would have to admit that President Trump did the right thing. But of course, the Democrats can't do that. They always have to be against him. You know, on the right side of the aisle, we will at least admit, hey, the media did this right, or hey, I don't usually agree with this Democrat, but they did, or they said something I agree with. You see that sort of bipartisanship. You see that sort of goodwill coming from the right side of the aisle, but for whatever reason, we just don't see that coming from the left. Now, there is one surprising exception to that rule, but is it because he's afraid of justice, vengeance, retribution, whatever the left wants to call it? John Brennan was actually pushed on this on MS Now, and he really shut up Jen Psaki with his take on the whole thing.
What did you make of the events of the last 24 hours here?
Well, John, I thought you did a very good job teeing this up. First of all, again, the U.S. military and U.S. intelligence are second to none in terms of their capabilities, their competence, talent, as well as their courageous actions. And so it does look as though it was a flawlessly executed operation, at least according to what we hear from the administration so far. And a lot of planning went into that. But that was, I don't want to say it's the easy part, because it was a sort of a complex operation. But this happened less than 24 hours ago. Now the big question is, what is the impact of that action? I think there are a lot of people in Venezuela and outside who are celebrating the departure of Maduro. As you pointed out, he was an illegitimately installed leader, a dictator of Venezuela. He was involved in drug running for a number of years. He's been involved in a lot of, criminal activity. And so, yes, it's good that he is no longer in charge. But the big question is, what is going to happen now after this?
Yeah, the big question is what's next. And for a lot of people, even on the right side of the aisle, especially in MAGA, a lot of people are worried, hey, is this nation building? Hey, is this Iraq 2.0? And Marco Rubio was pushed about this on the morning talk shows, and I thought he gave a great answer. But before we get into all of that, I would like to acknowledge the members of today's Governors Club. They are Andy's Girl 71 and Conserva Girl Cleo. These are people who give tips and super thanks to the channel. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you enjoy. But I thought Marco Rubio raised a really great point with Kristen Welker.
Pay the price for it, not under President Trump.
Let's talk big picture here. U.S. regime change, historically speaking, has not gone very well for the United States. In Iraq, in Libya, to name a few examples. Can you assure Americans, the people of the United States, that this time will be different?
Well, here's what's happened. We've got this phobia built up and this sort of thing that's psyche. Number one, most of the experts that people have on television, I watch these experts and it's clown hour. Okay, these are people that have focused their entire career on the Middle East or some other part of the world because that's where all the action was. Very few of them know anything about Venezuela or the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela looks nothing like Libya. It looks nothing like Iraq. It looks nothing like Afghanistan. It looks nothing like the Middle East other than the Iranian agents that are running through their plotting against America. Okay, these are Western countries with long traditions among their at a people-to-people and cultural level and ties to the United States. So there's nothing like that. So I think people need to stop ascribing the apples and oranges here, the apples of the Middle East to the oranges of the Western Hemisphere.
But do you...
Number two, this is about the national interest of the United States. And what I'm confident of is we are in a safer and better place because we're taking it seriously. The alternative would have been to leave Maduro there as an indicted drug trafficker, illegitimate president, running the country, open invitation for all of our adversaries to do whatever they want against the United States from Venezuela. That was not going to continue. The alternative would have been to allow a drug trafficker to continue to use national territory and elements of nation-state power to further drug trafficking organizations. Read the indictment. This guy used the levers of their security apparatus not to arrest drug traffickers, but to cooperate and facilitate the trafficking of drugs for the purpose of getting them into the United States. And that's going to stop.
I love so many times during that answer, you could hear Kristen Welker scoff. At one point, it sounded like she was laughing at what Marco Rubio was saying, and she tried to interrupt multiple times, but he didn't let her, tried to derail him from his train of thought. She asked him a question, and he really just laid out all the facts, and I thought he made a very strong case for what the administration is trying to do. And it really shows you, in the past, the Republicans sort of just rolled over like dogs, right? Whenever there was any sort of aggression from the mainstream media, oh, we don't want to offend you, we don't want to come across as unlikable, or, oh, our PR, it is nice to finally see people with a backbone, people with conviction, people who believe in what they're doing and not being afraid to defend that on a national and international stage. So I thought Marco Rubio did a brilliant job, not just on NBC, but also on ABC. It was a great morning if you're a big fan of the Sunday talk shows, because they really went back and forth. And as you saw there with Kristen Welker, they didn't shy away from the tough questions. And I thought Marco Rubio and everyone else who was interviewed, they came prepared. They came, they just knew the exact right notes to hit, and it's because this mission has been thought out, it's been planned, and I thought they executed it brilliantly. As always, though, all of this is just my analysis and commentary. That's what's happening in the world of politics from my point of view, and I would love to hear from you. What has surprised you the most when it comes to this mission to take down Maduro? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Obviously, we are in the fog of war. There's a lot of news coming out, a lot of details, and I think a lot of it is inspiring, surprising, shocking, unexpected. So what did you find interesting about all of this? Not just about, obviously, the discussion around it, but the actual mission itself, the way it was executed, the planning that's gone on for months. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you haven't already, please be sure to leave me a thumbs up. I know it's a simple thing to ask for, but hey, guess what? It really does help me reach more viewers like you in the algorithm. Be sure to smash that subscribe button and to check out one of these videos.